For 2 years, every time I walked into a job interview in that small town in Ohio, I saw the same look appear at the end of the meeting. At first, they smiled at me. They shook my hand. They praised my nearly perfect accounting grades. But then all it took was one phone call behind my back, and everything changed. A rejection email would arrive. The door that had just cracked open would slam shut in my face. I did not find out until much later that the person making those calls was my own father. He told them I was a thief. Not once. Not to one company. He said it to nearly every business owner in town. He said I had stolen money from my family. He said I could not be trusted with anything related to finances. He said it in the voice of a heartbroken father, so anyone listening would believe he was only trying to protect the community from his troubled daughter. The cruelest part was that my mother knew. My older brother knew. And not one of them stood up and said a single word. If you have ever been turned into the villain by the very people who were supposed to love you, comment the number one. I want to know how many people out there have had to silently carry an injustice no one else could see. My name is Clara Whitmore. When this story began, I was 26 years old. I had an accounting degree and a dream of leaving the town where people knew my father's name before they knew mine. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, life would eventually become fair. I was wrong. Some people do not need to destroy you with their own hands. They only need to whisper the right words to the right person, then sit back and watch the world turn against you. My father, Raymond Whitmore, owned the largest construction company in the area. To the neighbors, he was successful, strict, and generous. But inside our home, he used money like a chain. All he had to do was look down the dinner table, and the entire room would fall silent. My mother, Elaine, always sat beside him and avoided looking at me whenever I needed her most. I used to think I was simply the daughter who was loved a little less. Later, I understood that in that house, I was not really a daughter. I was an asset that refused to stay in its assigned place. For 2 years, I was rejected from job after job. For 2 years, I scrubbed hotel floors for people who used to call me the smartest girl in class. One evening, my father raised a glass of wine in the restaurant where I was working in uniform and said, "Maybe now you'll learn how to respect your family." He did not know I had not broken yet. And he definitely did not know that 15 years earlier, my grandmother had left an envelope inside the safe of a man I had never met. An envelope with my name on it. An envelope that would make the very company my father was begging for support stand on my side instead. But before I tell you about the night he lost his honor in front of 200 people, I have to take you back to where it all began. To the White House, where a little girl once believed that if she behaved well enough for long enough, her parents would eventually love her fairly. The Whitmore family home stood on a quiet street in Columbus. From the outside, it looked like a photograph from a magazine about successful living. White walls. Evenly trimmed grass. Fresh flowers always placed in the living room. My mother often stood by the door with a gentle smile, as if her duty was to keep that house from showing a single crack. But the real cracks were not in the walls. They were in the way we sat around the dinner table. My father always sat at the head of the table. My mother sat to his right. My older brother Nathan sat to his left. And I sat at the far end near the kitchen door, the most convenient place to get up for more bread, pour more water, or clear the plates. No one ever said out loud that it was my place. But in that house, some things did not need to be spoken to be understood. Nathan was 4 years older than me. He was my father's pride. When Nathan wanted to attend a private school, my father wrote the check immediately. When he wanted an internship in New York, my father called a few connections. When Nathan graduated with a degree in business administration, my father bought him a black BMW and said a man needs an image worthy of his future. I clapped along with everyone else. Not because I was not happy for him, but because I was old enough to understand that in our house, Nathan's future was an investment, while mine was only an expense to be reduced. When I was 16, I once asked my father to let me join a summer accounting program in Boston. I had found a partial scholarship myself. I had prepared the application myself. I only needed him to help with the remaining costs. My father did not even finish reading the paper. I handed him. He set it down on the table, gave a faint laugh, and said, "A girl doesn't need to go far away to learn how to count money. One day, when you get married, your husband will handle the important things." My mother was washing vegetables at the kitchen sink. I looked at her, waiting for her to say something. She only lowered her head further, letting the sound of running water fill the silence. That was the first time I understood that silence could also be a kind of betrayal. From that day on, I learned how to make myself smaller. I stopped telling my father about my top grades, because he only nodded as if they were simply what I was supposed to achieve. I stopped telling my mother that I was scared because I knew she would only tell me not to upset my father. But I still had my grandmother, Rose Caldwell. She lived in a red brick house a little over an hour away, a place that always smelled of mint tea and old books. Every summer, she taught me how to read financial statements, calculate compound interest, and understand that money was not only for buying things. It could also give a person the right to say no. One afternoon when I was 15, she held my hand on the porch and said, "Clara, one day you'll need a door your father doesn't hold the key to." I asked her what she meant. She only looked toward the setting sun and said, "When the time comes, you'll understand." Back then, I still believed family was the place where people were protected. I did not yet know that some cages were painted a very beautiful shade of white. The summer before I started college, my father handed me a silver credit card. He placed it on the dining table and pushed it toward me with 2 fingers, as if he were offering me something that might dirty his palm if he held it for too long. My mother sat beside him, smiled gently, and said, "Use it for books, school supplies, necessary things only." I took the card. At the time, I was 18 years old, and I still had that almost foolish habit of wanting to prove I could be trusted. I did not buy new dresses. I did not buy perfume. I did not go out to restaurants with my friends. I used it to buy accounting textbooks, a financial calculator, a few notebooks, pens, and an old laptop from the school's liquidation store. Altogether, it came to $1,200. I thought I had done the right thing. I even kept the receipts in a blue envelope neatly arranged in my drawer, just in case my father wanted to check. At the end of the month, the statement arrived at the house. That evening, my father called me down to the dining room. I still remember the yellow chandelier light spilling across the wooden table. I remember my mother standing by the glass cabinet with a pale face. I remember Nathan leaning back in his chair, as if he were waiting to watch a play. My father placed the statement in front of me and tapped the final number with his finger. $1,200, he said slowly. "Do you think this house is your personal bank?" I froze. "You said I could use it for school," I said. "Everything was for books and supplies." I said, "Necessary," he snapped. "Not spending money like some shameless little girl." I looked at my mother. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I saw a little pity in her eyes, but pity saves no one when it is not brave enough to become words. My father announced that I would pay back every cent. If I did not, I could find somewhere else to live. I had just started college. I had no money, no car of my own, and no one strong enough to stand beside me. So I did the only thing I could do. I lowered my head and took on 2 more part-time jobs. During the day, I studied. In the afternoons, I worked at the library. On weekends, I made coffee at a cafe near campus. 8 months later, I paid back all $1,200. I handed my father every receipt, every confirmation of payment. He did not thank me. He did not apologize. He only took the stack of papers, glanced through them, and said, "I hope you learned your lesson." I did learn, but not the lesson he wanted me to learn. I learned that in that house, the truth mattered less than the person who had the power to retell it. I learned that money could be offered, as help then turned into a trap. I learned that if my father wanted to call me the guilty one, he would find a way to make the whole room believe him. But I still did not know that years later that very $1,200 would become the sentence he used to bury my career. I thought I had finished paying that debt. I did not know my father had never intended to let it end. The day I graduated from college, the sun in Columbus was so bright that the campus looked as if it had been covered with a thin layer of glass. I stood among a crowd of students in black gowns, clutching my accounting degree, feeling both nervous and strangely weightless. 6 years. Other people got through college in 4 years. It took me 6 because I had to keep working to repay the debt my father called a lesson. But that day I allowed myself to be happy. I had graduated with honors. My grades were almost perfect. One professor who had once worked at a major accounting firm had even written me a recommendation letter. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had something that did not belong to my father, something he had not given me, something he could not take back just because I failed to be obedient. When my name was called, I walked across the stage and looked down at the family seats. My father was sitting there in a gray suit. My mother was beside him. Nathan sat between them, leaning down to say something that made both of them laugh. No one looked up at the exact moment I received my diploma. I paused for the briefest second. It was so brief that no one else would have noticed, but it was long enough for me to understand that there are moments in your life your family will never choose to honor. After the ceremony, my father found me near the parking lot. He did not hug me. He did not say he was proud of me. He only glanced at the diploma in my hand and said, "Not bad. Now you can come work at the company and handle the books." I looked up. For 1 second, my heart betrayed me. It hoped. It thought maybe my father had finally seen my worth. What would the position be, I asked. My father adjusted the button of his suit jacket. The first year would be unpaid. You'll live at home, help your mother, and learn the company's system. When Nathan takes over, you'll support him. Family doesn't keep score. I heard every word clearly. Unpaid. Live at home. Help my mother. Support Nathan. Everything I had spent years trying to escape had been wrapped neatly under the name of opportunity. My mother stood behind him, looking down at the bouquet in her hands. Nathan gave a small smirk, as if he had already known I would have no choice but to accept. I took a deep breath. "Thank you, Dad," I said, "but I want to try finding a job outside the company first. I need independent experience." The smile on my father's face disappeared slowly enough to be frightening. He looked at me the way he would look at an employee who had dared to disobey an order. "Suit yourself," he said. His voice was very quiet. But the quieter it became, the colder I felt. "Try it your way." Then he turned and walked back to the Mercedes. My mother followed him. As Nathan passed me, he patted my shoulder and said under his breath, "Don't think that degree makes you important." I stood alone in the parking lot sunlight, falling across my brand new diploma. I told myself I had made the right choice. I told myself that somewhere out there someone would judge me by my ability, not by my father's last name. I did not know that the words "try it your way" were not him letting me go. They were a declaration of war. In the first week after graduation, I sent out 12 applications. A small accounting firm, a regional bank, an insurance office, a real estate management company. I adjusted every cover letter carefully. And every time I pressed send, I felt a small light of hope rise in my chest. At first, things went better than I expected. The hiring manager at Miller & Grant shook my hand firmly and told me my resume was impressive. The HR representative at the bank even asked if I could start the following week. I went back to my tiny apartment, opened a refrigerator that had nothing but eggs and milk inside, and still smiled, because I thought my life was finally about to turn a page. Then the first rejection email arrived. Then the second. Then the third. The polite wording was so similar, it felt cold. "We regret to inform you We have chosen a candidate who is a better fit. I read them over and over, trying to find some sign of what I had done wrong. But every interview had gone well. Only the outcomes were cold. A month passed, and I had been through nearly 20 interviews. Not one place hired me. I began to doubt myself. Maybe an excellent degree was still not enough if the woman holding it was still a Whitmore. Until that afternoon at Patterson Financial. The woman interviewing me was Helen Morris, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes. When the interview was almost over, she set her pen down and looked at me for a long moment. "Clara," she said quietly, "you seem like a good young woman. And I shouldn't be saying this." My heart tightened. "What is it?" She glanced toward the glass door. "You should ask your father why no one in this town wants to hire you." The sentence landed on the desk like something heavy. I wanted to ask more, but she had already stood up, her face full of guilt. "I'm sorry," she said. "That's all I can say." That evening I drove to my parents' house. My father was in his office, a glass of whiskey beside a stack of files. I did not go in circles. I asked him directly, "You called them, didn't you?" He looked up. A small smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "I only told them the truth." "What truth?" "That you took $1,200 from this family. That you can't be trusted with money." I told him I had paid back every cent. I told him it had been for books, for school supplies, for the things he had allowed me to buy. My father shrugged. "That's how you remember it." "I remember that you stole." My mother was standing in the doorway. I did not know how long she had been there, but she had heard everything. I looked at her, waiting for one sentence. Just one. But she lowered her face again. "If you understand what it feels like when a family member knows the truth and still chooses silence, comment, I understand. Some wounds do not come from the lie itself. They come from the person who could have saved you and chose not to." My father stood and stepped closer to me. "You rejected the opportunity I gave you," he said. "You thought you could live without this family. Now do you see it, Clara? Without me, you are nothing." I left that house without crying in front of him. But when I sat in my car, I lowered my forehead onto the steering wheel and trembled in waves. At last I understood. My father did not want me to fail because I was weak. He wanted me to fail so he could prove I belonged inside his cage. Willow Inn sat on the edge of town beside the road that led out toward the state park. It was not a luxury hotel. The hallway carpets were old, the yellow lights were dim, and the front desk always smelled faintly of stale coffee. But on the job listing there was one line I stared at for a long time. Housekeeping staff needed. No experience required. No reference letter necessary. I applied at 2 in the morning. 3 days later, I stood in front of the manager, Linda Harris. She looked at my resume then, at the old suit I had tried so hard to iron flat. "An honors degree in accounting," she said. "And you want to clean hotel rooms?" I was too tired to keep lying. "Because no one else will hire me," I said. "And I need to pay my rent." Linda looked at me for a long moment. I thought she must have heard the stories about me. But then she took out a pale blue uniform and placed it in front of me. "I don't care what people say," she said. "I care whether you show up on time and do honest work." I held that uniform with both hands. It was ugly, stiff, and easily wrinkled. But that day it was the first thing in months that did not come with one of my father's conditions attached to it. The job began at 6 in the morning. I scrubbed bathtubs, changed sheets, collected dirty towels, and cleaned stains left behind by guests who forgot them the moment they walked out. Some days my back hurt so badly that I had to sit on the laundry room floor just to breathe. Some days I passed, people I knew in the hallway. They would look at the name Clara on my chest, then turn away as if failure could spread through eye contact. But it was still my money. Small money, yes. but clean money. And most importantly, my father could not control it. 6 months later, on a Friday evening, I was pushing a linen cart down the hallway near the restaurant when I heard a familiar laugh. Deep, loud, and confident, the kind of laugh I had once believed the whole world had to make room for. My father. Through the open doorway, I saw him sitting at a table near the window. My mother was wearing a cream-colored dress with pearls at her throat. Nathan leaned back in his chair, turning a glass of wine in his hand. There was no reason for them to have dinner at Willow Inn. They had always called this place cheap. I understood immediately. They had not come to eat. They had come to look at me. My father turned his head just as I was about to step back. His eyes stopped on the housekeeping cart, then on the rubber gloves in my hand. A slow smile spread across his face. "Elaine," he said loudly enough for a few nearby tables to hear. "Look at that. Our daughter finally found a job that suits her." My mother's face went stiff. She did not laugh. But she did not tell him to stop either. Nathan chuckled. "Clara, I think room 214 still has dust in it," he said. "Or are you only good at counting other people's money?" Several guests turned to look. A woman from church recognized me. In that moment, I stood under the restaurant lights in my wrinkled blue uniform holding dirty towels, while my family sat at a white table with crystal glasses shining in front of them. My father raised his wine glass toward me. "Maybe now you've learned how to respect your family." I did not answer. I only turned the cart around and pushed it down the hallway, its wheels squeaking against the floor. But from that night on, something inside me was no longer soft. I remembered what Grandma Rose had said. "One day you'll need a door your father doesn't hold the key to." And I began to wonder whether that day had finally come. 3 weeks after the dinner at Willow Inn, I started selling the last things in my apartment. An old camera. A few accounting textbooks. A coat I had once bought for interviews, but now just looking at it reminded me of doors slamming shut. I did not want to sell them, but rent did not care about pride. That evening, while searching through a cardboard box under my bed, I found my old phone. The screen had a diagonal crack across it like a scar. I had forgotten about it after switching phones because the battery had stopped working. I did not know why I plugged it in. Maybe I was desperate enough to want to hear anything that belonged to another version of my life. The phone vibrated after nearly 10 minutes. A flood of old notifications appeared. Messages from classmates. Promotional emails. A few missed calls from 3 years earlier around the time Grandma Rose passed away. I was about to turn it off when I saw one unheard voicemail. I pressed play. "Miss Clara Whitmore, this is Walter Bennett from the law office of Bennett & Cole. I'm calling regarding the estate of Mrs. Rose Caldwell. There are some documents we need you to confirm in person. Please contact us as soon as possible." I sat frozen on the floor. The man's voice was old, dry, and polite. But every word felt like it was pulling a string inside my chest. Grandma Rose's estate. Documents I needed to confirm. Why had I never known about this? I remembered her funeral. My father had said everything had been handled. He said she had left behind a few keepsakes and most of her assets to charity. Nothing worth worrying about, he had said at the time, as if her love were just another file he had the right to close. My hand was shaking when I called the law office. A female receptionist answered. I gave her my name and my grandmother's name. I heard the clicking of a keyboard on the other end, then a long silence. "Esther. Bennett retired more than a year ago," she said. "But this file does have a note." "What note?" "The office tried to contact you several times. After that, Mr. Raymond Whitmore called back and said you did not wish to pursue the inheritance matter." The room seemed to tilt around me. My father had no right to speak for me. She was quiet for a few seconds. "I'm only reading the note in the file, ma'am. The case was later transferred to another attorney. I'll need to look further to see where it is now. I left my new phone number. I thanked her. Then I sat for a long time in the dark apartment, still holding the old phone in my hand. My father had known. He had known Grandma Rose left something for me, and he had blocked it like every other door. But unlike the interviews this time, he had not managed to make the trail disappear completely. On the cracked screen, the voicemail was still lit up. I played it again. There are some documents we need you to confirm in person. For the first time in months, fear inside me gave way to something else. Not exactly hope. Hope still felt too expensive then. It was suspicion. A sharp suspicion that Grandma Rose had seen something long before I did. Maybe somewhere she had left me a way out. My father had not managed to burn down. A month after the call with the law office, my father suddenly called me. I stared at his name on the screen for a long time before answering. He had not called in weeks. Not because he had forgotten me, but because he had always known that silence could be another way to tighten a hand around someone's throat. "Clara," he said, his voice so warm it sounded false. "This has gone on long enough. Your mother misses you. I don't want this family matter to drag on any further." I stood in my tiny kitchen staring at the water stain on the ceiling. "What do you want?" "Come home. Work at the company. I'll pay you. Not much at first, but enough. You can stay at the house, help your mother for a while. I'll call a few places and clear up those misunderstandings about you." Misunderstandings. He said it as if 2 years of destroying my reputation were nothing more than a small stain on a shirt that could be washed out as long as I was obedient enough. "And if I don't come home?" I asked. There was a pause on the other end. When my father spoke again, the warmth was gone. "Then keep cleaning hotel rooms until you learn some sense." He hung up before I could answer. 10 minutes later, my mother called. Her voice was soft and tired, as if she were the one I had hurt. "Clara, please stop being stubborn. Your father only wants what's best for you. By making the entire town believe I'm a thief. He just has a temper. But family is still family." I closed my eyes. That sentence had chained me for years. Family is still family. But if family is the place where people use love to make you kneel, then it is no longer a home. The next evening, I worked the late shift at Willow Inn. Around 10, I went into the second-floor storage room to get more towels. Through the old air vent in the wall, voices from the restaurant downstairs drifted up. I was about to ignore them until I heard my name. "Clara is close to giving in," my father said. "A few more months and she'll crawl back on her own." I froze, my hands still resting on a stack of white towels. Another man's voice answered, low and rough. "My son doesn't need trouble. I heard the girl had some theft issue." "I have that under control," my father replied as calmly as if he were discussing the price of building materials. "The important thing is that if the Whitmore family and the Palmer family join together, no one in this town will be able to compete with us. Your son needs a wife who knows how to listen. My daughter needs stability." It makes perfect sense. The blood in my body went cold. The other man laughed. "Are you talking about a marriage or a business merger?" My father laughed too. "What's the difference? Once she has no other choice, she'll agree." I stepped back, my spine hitting the supply shelf. Several towels fell to the floor, but I did not bend down to pick them up. In my mind, everything locked into place. The destroyed job opportunities. The ruined reputation. The phone calls trying to lure me back home. All of it had not only been punishment. My father was making me poor, isolating me, pushing me into desperation, and then planning to place me into a marriage, as if I were the final asset on his balance sheet. What would you do if you discovered your own father was preparing to sell your future for a business advantage? Comment 1, if you would leave immediately. Comment 2, if you would stay and fight. That night, I did not sleep. I opened my laptop and sent job applications to cities where my father had no power: Chicago, Denver, Atlanta, Cleveland. I applied to any accounting position that fit, even the lowest entry-level ones. Many places rejected me. Some never answered. I started to think I had waited too long. Then one email appeared. Subject: Interview invitation from Mercer Holdings. I read it 3 times and still could not believe it. Mercer Holdings was the largest financial corporation in the region. And the final line almost made me stop breathing. The interview would be conducted personally by Mr. Daniel Mercer, Chief Executive Officer. I did not understand why a CEO would want to meet a woman who was cleaning hotel rooms. But in that moment, I heard Grandma Rose's voice again in my memory. When the time comes, you'll understand. The night before the interview, I slept in a cheap motel near the bus station. I hung the dark blue suit I had bought from a thrift store in the bathroom and turned on the hot water, hoping the steam would smooth out the wrinkles. It was the best outfit I owned. I practiced answering interview questions in front of the mirror until almost midnight. Why do you want to work at Mercer Holdings? Because I want to be judged by my ability, not by someone else's version of me. I did not say that answer out loud. I only practiced the more polite version, saying that I valued transparency. But deep inside, I only wanted one place my father could not walk into and turn me into the villain. The next morning, just as I reached the Mercer Holdings building, my phone rang. My father? I looked at the screen, then answered. Clara, he said coldly. I hear you have an interview today. My heart dropped. How do you know that? Nathan saw the photo you posted at the bus station. He figured out where you were going. I looked up at the glass building in front of me. 26 floors reflected the morning sun, so tall it made me feel smaller. Go home, my father said. I know people in finance. One phone call is all it takes. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated again. A text from Nathan appeared on the screen. You're done. Dad already called. Take the bus home before you embarrass yourself. My hand went cold. For a few seconds, I truly thought about turning around. The last 2 years had taught me that my father always found a way to close doors in my face. But then I remembered his voice saying that once I had no other choice, I would agree. I turned off my phone, slipped it into my pocket, and stepped through the revolving doors of Mercer Holdings. The lobby was almost blindingly bright. The marble floor shone like water. People in suits passed by me with the confidence of those who knew exactly where they belonged. I walked to the reception desk, trying not to look down at the scuffed toes of my shoes. I'm Clara Whitmore. I have an interview scheduled. The receptionist typed a few keys, then looked up. Something in her expression changed very slightly. Yes, Miss Whitmore. Esther. Mercer is expecting you. The private elevator is on the left. His assistant will meet you on the 26th floor. I was not sure I had heard correctly. Esther. Mercer. Yes. The elevator rose almost without a sound. I watched the numbers change on the screen floor by floor, feeling as if I were being lifted out of my old life, without knowing whether what waited above me was rescue or humiliation. The doors opened into a quiet reception area. A woman in a gray dress was waiting for me. Miss Whitmore, Mr. Mercer has been waiting for you for a very long time. A very long time. Those words made me stop, but she only opened a large wooden door and gestured for me to step inside. Daniel Mercer stood beside the window. He was in his 50s with silver at his temples and a calm face. But the way he looked at me was not the way people looked at a job candidate. It was the way someone looked at a promise that had finally arrived. Clara, he said softly, before we talk about the job, I need to give you something. He walked to a wall safe, entered a code, and took out an old ivory envelope. The wax seal had faded to the color of amber, On the front of the envelope was Grandma Rose's handwriting. To be opened only after Rose Caldwell has passed away, and my granddaughter Clara Whitmore comes to Mercer Holdings seeking work. Below it was a date from 15 years earlier. I could not breathe. Daniel placed the envelope in my hands. Your grandmother was the first person who believed in this company, he said. And she believed that one day you would need us. I stared at the envelope in my hands for a long time before I dared to open it. The wax seal was old, but Grandma Rose's handwriting was still clear, as if she had written it only yesterday. In that moment, Daniel Mercer's spacious office disappeared. All I could see was the red brick porch again, and her wrinkled hands resting over mine. Inside the envelope were three things: a handwritten letter, a notarized stock certificate, and a small notebook with a brown leather cover. I opened the certificate first. The legal wording made my eyes blur, but there were a few phrases I understood very clearly. Clara Amelia Whitmore. Founding shares. 8%. Mercer Holdings. I looked up at Daniel. I don't understand. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. 20 years ago, when Mercer Holdings was still only an idea, Rose invested in my company, he said. She created a trust in your name. Legal, irrevocable, and impossible to transfer by anyone, except you. My father didn't know. No. Your grandmother was very careful. Your name never appeared publicly. She said that if Raymond knew, he would find a way to take it. I looked down at the paper again. 8% of a major financial corporation. I did not know how much it was worth. I only knew it was something my father could not poison with a phone call, could not steal with a lie, and could not turn into a debt to use against me. Daniel continued, she also asked our HR system to flag your name. If you ever applied here, I would be notified immediately. That is why I'm meeting with you today. 15 years. A woman who had been gone from this world was still waiting for me inside an envelope. I opened the letter. My dearest Clara, if you are reading these words, it means you have found your way to the place I prepared for you. I am sorry. I cannot place this in your hands myself. But some gifts must be hidden carefully because the person who needs them most is often living beside someone who would steal them. I covered my mouth with my hand, but the tears still fell. She wrote that she had seen my father clearly from the beginning. She had seen the way he controlled my mother with money, with anger, with insults, disguised as discipline. She had once begged my mother to leave. My mother would not go. And so Rose wrote, I could not save my daughter. But I swore I would not let my granddaughter be locked inside the same cage. She knew that one day my father would call my independence disobedience. He would call my dreams stubbornness. And when he could not force me to bow my head, he would make sure I had nowhere left to go. So she prepared a door. At the end of the letter, her handwriting had begun to tremble. Do not let anyone use money to buy your obedience. Do not let anyone call control love. Real family does not make you smaller so they can feel bigger. Live freely, Clara. That is the only thing I have ever wanted for you. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried, not because of the money, not because of the job, but because after 2 years of an entire town believing I was a thief, I finally had proof that someone had always seen me. Not the version of me my father had created. The real me. When Daniel returned, he told me my father had called. Raymond had repeated the same old story, saying I had stolen money from my family and could not be trusted. Daniel looked straight at me. He just tried to smear the reputation of a founding shareholder of Mercer Holdings. For the first time in a very long time, I laughed through my tears. 1 week later, I stood in the second-floor waiting room of the Grand Meridian Hotel, looking down at the glittering lobby below. People in suits and evening gowns moved past one another, as if the world had never known anyone who had to scrub floors just to survive. I was wearing a dark blue dress, prepared by the communications team. It was not extravagant, only elegant enough to make me look like someone who belonged in that room. Inside my small purse, I kept Grandma Rose's letter. Knowing it was there helped me stand steadier. Through the high glass window, I saw my family walk in. My father entered first, shoulders straight, chin lifted. My mother followed behind him wearing her familiar string of pearls. Nathan came last, phone in hand, his face still carrying the bored expression of someone who had never spent his life afraid of losing anything. My father did not know I was up there. He shook hands, with people laughed loudly and tried to move closer to Daniel Mercer. Daniel later told me that my father had mentioned Whitmore Construction, talked about contracts, and then shifted into the story of his difficult daughter who had broken his heart. He was still selling the same story. The only difference was that this time the person listening already knew the part he had hidden. An assistant stepped into the room. "Miss Whitmore, it's time." I took a deep breath. This was not a moment of revenge. This was the moment I took back my name after 2 years of having it dragged through the mud. Daniel stepped onto the stage. The conversation slowly quieted. He thanked the guests, then his voice grew slower. "Tonight I would like to introduce someone special. Someone who represents courage when a person is forced to stand alone." The side door opened. I walked in. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me. I did not look at my father right away. But I felt the exact moment he recognized me. A glass shattered near the bar. I guessed it was Nathan. "Please welcome Miss Clara Whitmore," Daniel said, Mercer Holdings' newest financial analyst and one of the company's founding shareholders. Silence fell before the whispers burst across the room. I turned. My father stood frozen, his face white. My mother gripped his arm. Nathan stared at me as if I had just stepped out of his nightmare. Then my father rushed forward. "She has no right to be here," he shouted. "Daniel, you don't understand. She is a thief." The entire room went still. Daniel took one step forward, his voice calm. "Esther Whitmore, I suggest you lower your voice." "No. I told you already. She took money from this family. She can't be trusted with anything related to finances." Daniel looked at him for a long moment. "I know the story of the $1,200 for textbooks that Clara paid back in full. I also know you used that story to sabotage your daughter's career for 2 years." A wave of whispers moved through the room. My father's face flushed red. "That is a family matter." "And what about your plan to force her to marry the Palmer son in exchange for a business advantage?" Daniel asked. My mother let out a sharp breath. Nathan took half a step back. My father lost control. "She needed to learn how to obey," he shouted. "I raised her. I fed her. I sent her to school. If I want her to come home, she comes home. If I want her to understand her place, then she will understand it." Every word of his rang through the silent room. No one needed me to expose him anymore. He was doing it himself. I stepped to the microphone. "I did not come here to humiliate my father," I said. "I came because for 2 years I was called a thief without ever being given the chance to defend myself. My grandmother saw what I was once too afraid to see. She knew that one day I would need a door no one in my family could lock." I looked at my father. "I do not hate you. But I will not live under your control anymore. I am not your property. I am not your contract. And I do not need your permission to have value." A second of silence stretched like an entire lifetime. Then the applause began. At first it was scattered. Then the entire room stood. My father turned and looked around, searching for a single face that still stood with him. There was none. My family left the gala in silence. No loud laughter. No powerful handshakes. only my father's back growing smaller as he walked away for the first time, unable to control the story he had just ruined himself. 1 month after the gala, my life did not turn into a fairy tale. I did not wake up in a mansion. The pain did not disappear overnight. But for the first time in years, when I woke up each morning, I was no longer afraid of my phone ringing because of my father. I started working at Mercer Holdings on a Monday morning. My office was on the 14th floor. It was not large, only a desk, a filing cabinet, and a window overlooking the city. But on the door, there was a nameplate, Clara Whitmore. Not Raymond's daughter. Not the thief from the rumors. Just my name, as if it had finally been returned to where it belonged. Daniel did not treat me like a symbol of victory. He gave me real work, real files, and meetings I had to prepare for until late at night. I lacked experience, so I studied harder than anyone else. Some days I came back to my new apartment and sat silently on the floor because I was exhausted. But it was the exhaustion of someone building her own life, not the exhaustion of someone being crushed under someone else's foot. I rented a small apartment near downtown. It was not spacious, but it had a window that caught the morning sun. On my first night there, I sat among unopened boxes, placed a vase of flowers on the kitchen table, and took out Grandma Rose's letter to read it again. Live freely, Clara. I read that sentence and cried. Not violently the way I had cried in Daniel's office. Just slow tears, as if my body had finally understood that it had escaped the place where it had always been forced to stay on guard. News about my father spread even faster than the rumors he had once planted about me. 3 major contracts with Whitmore Construction were canceled within weeks. People in town began telling the story differently, as if they had never fully believed him in the first place. I heard a few late apologies. I did not need all of them to like me. I only needed them to lose the right to define me. My mother called me on a rainy evening. Her voice was so small, I almost did not recognize it. Can you forgive me? I watched the rain run down the glass. There had been a time when I wanted to hear those words so badly that I thought if they ever came, every wound would heal. But when they finally did, I only felt sad. I forgive you, I said. But I'm not coming back. She cried. I cried too. But this time my tears did not pull me back into the old cage. I understood that forgiveness did not mean opening the door for someone who had watched me be locked inside. Nathan sent a short, polite apology, the kind that sounded as if someone had advised him how to write it. I only replied, "Thank you." Maybe one day we would have a real conversation. Maybe not. My father did not call. I think he never will. For people like Raymond Whitmore, admitting fault hurts more than losing money. Perhaps in the story he tells, from now on I will still be the daughter who betrayed him. But that no longer matters. He can keep his version. I have taken back mine. If this story touched you, if you have ever had to save yourself from a family that used love as a tool of control, comment freedom. Not to fight anyone, but to remind yourself that you have the right to live a life that belongs to you. One Sunday afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where Grandma Rose was buried. I brought yellow roses. I sat in front of her headstone for a long time, telling her about my new office, my new apartment, and the way my hands still trembled whenever I stood before a major opportunity. You saved me, I whispered. Not only with money. You saved me by believing in me before I even knew how to believe in myself. The wind moved through the trees. I placed my hand on the cold stone and smiled. Now every time I open my purse, I still see her folded letter. The edges of the paper have softened because I have read it so many times. It reminds me that real love does not hold you back with fear. Real love prepares your feet so you can walk away. Freedom did not come to me like a miracle. It came as a carefully hidden envelope, a woman who had quietly looked far ahead, and a girl who was tired down to her bones but still walked through the final door. And this time no one could lock it again.